So I'm going to talk about describing because I've seen so many kids that most of my kids don't understand what describing is. They don't understand that, it's more than just defining um, a dog is a dog. No, you can't use the name dog when you describe a dog. You have to tell me what category it is. What's the giant category? What's the big group that it goes in? A dog is an animal. A pet. Is he an animal that lives in a zoo? Is he an animal that lives in a farm? Um, I love to work on describing, and I have a whole year devoted to describing this year. So we're going to be talking about classifications and associations and synonyms and antonyms and probably Spanish and English cognates for certain things. Um, we're going to use it for, similarities and differences and talking about color and function and asking and answering questions. So I'm looking forward to this year, and I think that, I know that you guys understand what describing is, but I'm just going to show you some things that I do when I work on describing. So obviously when we're working with younger kids, we need more concrete objects. So if we were going to describe something like this little froggy here, the preschool students that I work with need concrete objects to look at. So I might tell them to, tell me, what is it? What is it? It's a frog, right? So it's an animal. Tell me about the color. It's green. It's yellow. What color is here? It's black. What does it have? It has two eyes. It has two hands. It has 2 feet. What does it do? It likes to jump. Things like that. Pretty basic for the younger kids. There's, we need real concrete objects. So, hello, Mr. Froggy. Sometimes with our older kids or even the preschoolers, I like to read a book. This is Your Mama a Llama? There's a lot of descriptions in this book, a lot of things that you can talk about. What is this? What's happening? This is the little llama. Is that an egg? An egg is getting ready to crack. And there's owls up here. So who do you think the egg belongs to? So Is Your Mama a Llama by Deborah Garino and pictures by Stephen Kellogg. That's who I remember. So, is your mama a llama? I asked my friend Dave. No, she is not, is the answer Dave gave. She hangs by her feet and she lives in a cave. I do not believe that's how llamas behave. So then I would talk about, after I read the whole book, I would talk about, well, how does Dave, who's Dave? And how does he describe his mom? He talks about where she hangs and where she lives. And let's see. The little swan describes his mom, by the way she looks. She has a long neck and white feathers and wings. So all the animals are describing their moms in different ways. The little cow describes his mom. She grazes on grass and she likes to say moo. So we would talk about, what do the animals say? What do they eat? Where do they live? And that's another way that you can add describing. You can just pick out books like this and talk about the books with your kids. You can describe the fence and the type of day it is, and there's water in the background, and what's the weather like, and different things like that. You can add a lot of information into when you use a book like this, and it grabs the kids' attention. So another thing I like to do is have the talk about expanding metacognitive and metalinguistic skills with the kids. I have a book called What Are We Doing Today? And it's illustrated by Vilain Hulney. And I believe this has a 1988 copyright, and it's Communication Skill Builders. So inside this book, there's all the topics: waking up, getting dressed. So this is waking up, getting dressed, getting dressed. So you can ask the kids something like this, what is this little girl thinking? What is this little girl saying? So what is she thinking would be using metacognitive skills. What metalinguistic would be like, tell me what she's saying, tell me what the mom is saying, what is the mom and the little boy saying over here in this picture? And it's things that kids see and do every day, almost all of our students in some way. This is eating breakfast, so talking about what the little girl is doing here, what grandma is saying, what mom's doing, not only what is she doing, what is she saying, maybe what is she thinking? What's Dad thinking? He's pouring his coffee, he's looking at his little son. Who knows what he's thinking? What is the son thinking? His head is down, he has his head in his hands. You can get all kinds of describing these types of pictures and a lot of metacognitive and metalinguistic language in a book like this with little speech bubbles or thought bubbles. You can make your own. I don't know if you can get a book like this still, or they've probably got some, but this is one that has real nice pictures and they're still applicable to today's time. We have nice colored pictures, things that all of my students, even the ELL students, are familiar with most of these things, working in the kitchen. And I just like it because it gets all the kids, even my junior high kids, gets them talking about a lot of things. This goes through the day of an entire family from the time they get up, what they do to get dressed, what they had for breakfast, what they do throughout the day, all the way through getting ready for bed and bedtime. So it's a great way to get kids talking about what they did in their day. I will play Descripto Go Fish. So everyone gets it just like Go Fish. I pass out the cards. Everyone gets 7 cards. And in order for them to play, they have to ask their other students or myself, because we all play. So they'll say, Mrs. C, do you have, let's say that they're looking at a picture of a monkey. Mrs. C, do you have an animal and that eats bananas, that lives in a zoo? And I kind of like to pretend, I don't really understand. Can you tell me more? Can you, so they'll, and I'm looking at my cards and I know I have what they want, but I make them tell me more. They're brown, they're furry, or they have something like that. Is it a monkey? Yeah, it's a monkey, yay! So I give them my card, and then the next student goes, and I do have to remind them to start with the category, because they'll try to just say, do you have something that's brown? Yeah, can you tell me more? Do you have something that eats bananas? Can you tell me more? So I do use that a lot. But that's a fun activity. The kids always like to play Go Fish, and so this way I can get describing in. This is just a book called Thinking Maps, Tools for Learning. It's an old book. Again, this is by David Harley, and it's by Thinking Maps Incorporated. So I like to use bubble maps. I use graphic organizers all the time, and as I was saying in my Go Fish describing, I'll have a bubble map in front of the kids or on the table, maybe one for each of them. One of these filled out with the item. It'll just say item in the middle, and then it'll have some things that I want them to work on. Usually the younger kids are just describing using attributes of color, maybe size, shape, location, and function, something like that. So depending on what they are working on, I'll have a bubble map filled out, the older kids. So once kids learn how to use the bubble maps, like for instance, as they get older, and they're, well, even in first grade, they're already talking about reading comprehension. So you can take, your bubble map, and you can write, after you've read a book, you can write the name of the character in the book and then describe the character by using adjectives and adjective phrases, and then write them in the bubbles, and then add more bubbles as needed. And to further that activity, they can repeat the same process for a second character in the book. And then they can talk about similarities and differences between the characters. And that would actually lead you down into the double bubble map, where you're comparing and contrasting. So there are many different things that you can do with bubble maps. That's just the basic kind of beginning of graphic organizers, but it starts a lot of conversations. It really gets the kids talking and thinking about what they read, and how to describe things well. Okay, so for my project, I'm going to talk about defining and describing because in my experience, most of the kids that I work with have a really difficult time defining or describing using categories, attributes, um, feelings, different things like that. So I'll be talking about this book and a number of other things, but right now this is a book called Defining and Describing by Marilyn Toomey, illustrated by Kevin Newman, and unfortunately, it's a really cute book, but it has a copyright of 1991 by Circuit Publications, and I don't know if it's still in print, but it's a really great book. So in this book, we talk about defining and describing, and this is Charles, and he says, defining and describing, I do it all the time. Defining words about sports, different foods that I try, words on science tests, and tools that I use. Describing clothes that my friends wear, places I go, animals I see in the park, and a lot more. But I never thought I'd be defining and describing just about everything until one day I was cutting through the parking lot on my way to the store when all of a sudden an alien ship landed in the parking lot. And the alien, ah. So in the book, we have a situation where Charles has suddenly realized that he has to understand how to describe things for Maisie. She landed in her spaceship and she introduces herself to Charles, and she says, well, we're here. He says, we're here in a parking lot. And she says, well, I don't know what a parking lot is. So he goes on to have to think, I've never had to explain what a parking lot is before. So Maisie says, well, wait, I'll help you. My information input center is made up of sections. There's a section for each group of things that I think about. When I see or hear something new, my information transmitter sends it to the right section where I keep it while I think about it and learn more about it. And that's what we are trying to teach our students, right? Learning to think about classifying things into certain areas in their own heads. And so Charles, he decides, well, that's classifications. And so the book starts out explaining what classifications are. So they talk about places, buildings, animals, food, clothes, vehicles, jobs and careers, tools, sports, entertainment, and useful things. And it's a really neat little book. It can be adapted for different levels. It has lists of words of places that you can talk about, all kinds of articulation things in here that you can work on. And then you can generate wet places, places for cars and trucks, places to go on vacation, places with many buildings, and the list goes on and on. And they have all kinds of things for your different levels of students. Of course, you would do the crossword puzzles with your older students, but this gets the kids writing, it gets them seeing different words, it gets them organizing their thoughts in their mind as well as on paper. And then when we come to a different section in the book where Charles is explaining to Maisie, she says, now I know that many things are the same because they can be put into the same groups or categories. But how can I define something so that I can tell someone exactly what something is? Because we're talking about all animals. All animals aren't the same. All foods are not the same. All containers are not the same. So Charles says, well, when you define something, you need to tell what category it belongs in, and also some things about what you're defining that make it special, its unique characteristics. Here's how I define something. First, say the name, the subject of your definition that you're defining. Next, tell your listener the category into which the word fits. Finally, list the characteristics which make your subject special, like this. Blank is a classification and characteristics. She says, got it. That sounds like quite a manageable formula. I'll program it in just at once. Just one thing. What are some of these characteristics that make things special? There must be many, many different characteristics. You're right, says Charles. There are hundreds. Oh boy, I'd better recharge my input receptor. Okay, I'm ready. Tell me about the characteristics that makes things special and unique. So Charles, there's a list of characteristics that they give us in the book. So you can talk about color, brightness, the size, shape, texture, touch, weight, material that it's made with, strength, taste, smell, sound, distance, value, position. I don't usually go into all these things. I usually stay with the basic attributes. But then the book goes on to list different colors. And then you can brainstorm things that are red, blue, yellow, green. Use your imagination. What color or colors come to mind when you think of each of the following, and why? So, what color comes to mind when you think of sunshine, or fire, or spring, or a storm? So, it's just a great little book. It's a great big book. Talks about brightness, and so you can go on through all those different characteristics. And then there is more. So then later on in the book, Maisie discovers that there are more things to talk about when you're talking about certain things. She says, I'm learning a lot about things here on Earth. Everyone seems to be working hard to make this a nice place to live. People work together, they take care of the animals, they each plant flowers and trees and take care of them. Earth people are okay. I'm going to have so much to talk about when I get back to Spram. She's from Spram. So Charles says, well, tell me about a dog. And she says, okay, a dog is an animal that... He says, wait a minute. You don't need to define the word dog, because definitions are different than descriptions. You don't need to define the word dog because I already know what a dog is. Just describe this special dog to me so I know more about him. And Maisie says, wait, what does describe mean? How should I describe something? And Charles tells her that describing means to tell or write about something. You describe a particular thing when your listener already knows what it is that you're talking about. I already know what dogs are, so you don't have to define a dog for me. But I'm interested in the dog that follows you around the park. I'd like to know what he looks like, what's special about this dog. So when you describe a particular object or creature, all you need to do is tell or write the characteristics that make this particular creature or thing special. Well, that's easy, says Maisie. So she gives a description of a dog, and Charles says, that was a great description. I can close my eyes and picture the dog. Giving a good description is like painting a picture in your listener's mind. Can you describe anything else that you saw at the park? And so that's what I like to do, is have the kids at school close your eyes and tell me what you see in this book, or close your eyes and describe what you saw. What was that boy wearing? Just make a picture in your head. And those are some of the things I like to do. So we're going to learn a little bit more about describing. The internet has all kinds of different ideas. This is called Dice and Dot by Ashley Rossi, and I think this came from Pinterest. Somebody gave it to me at school. So the kids have to roll the dice, and whatever they land on, they have to describe things with two or more. First, they have to tell what category it goes in, which is really difficult for most kids, and then add two things that are in the same category before they can fill in their dot.